single day.
Welcome.
Free Thought Project Podcast.
I don't want you to protest, I don't want you to riot, I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being, God damn it! My life has value!
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Hello, everyone. This is the Free Thought Project Podcast. This is John Vibes. I'm joined by Matt Savoy and Jason Bassler today. We have a few interesting topics to talk about, some that you may have seen on the mainstream media and some of it that you may have not, and most of the angles that we'll cover you definitely didn't hear or see on the mainstream media. But before we get into that, I want to let everybody know that, as you guys are probably aware, we're a new podcast starting out after years of alternative media journalism in the written form, and we've recently been shut down by Facebook, so we definitely would appreciate your rating, review, subscribe, all that stuff adds to our numbers that helps people find us again after being cut off from us. So that would be a huge help if you could do that to support us. And while we're on that subject, actually, we have been republishing our pages in 2.0 format as we're awaiting our appeals, which will probably cancel our old pages. So it's our new process of rebuilding again. And these pages are getting shut down too. So they're actually specifically coming after us. But interestingly enough, the Free Thought Project 2.0 wasn't taken down. It was specifically Police the Police 2.0. I personally think it has something to do with the name. I think that, police accountability is obviously not welcome on these platforms anymore. But I believe it was Matt who discovered this week. And do you want to kind of break it down for us? What happened, Matt?
Yeah, sure. And actually, just to be completely correct here, it was taken down and then I appealed it, and so did Jason. They gave us absolutely zero reason. It said, the statement given by Facebook was, it looks like recent activity on your page doesn't follow the Facebook page policies. If you think your page was unpublished in error, you can appeal it and we'll take another look. What Facebook's policy is to delete it first and ask questions later. That they take down the content immediately, and then they'll go after, it's up to you to prove yourself innocent. So Jason and I both actually appealed that, the unpublishing, and a week or so later, we actually got the page back online. So it was, Facebook admitted that they messed up and then actually republished the page, which is pretty cool.
Well, and also, they reinstated our page that has very few people on there, and then they still left down the very same exact page with the same exact content. So I think it kind of shows that our other page was specifically targeted because of its size and its reach.
Yeah, no doubt. And we didn't share anything different on this new 2.0 page that we haven't done on the old ones, like on the Police to Police, the regular page, or Free Thought Project for that matter. And they've yet to respond to those appeals. So we're not very confident they will respond to those appeals, but and in fact, as Bassler might want to add here, it's gone even further.
Yeah, so this past week, Tumblr actually, what they call, terminated my account, which I've had since 2012. Before I even started creating any Facebook pages, it was all pretty much the same kind of content that we would post throughout our various social media networks. But for whatever reason, no explanation. Of course, once again, these social media companies have a penchant for being absolutely vague with their communication and explanations, which leaves a lot left to be desired to try to understand what the hell is going on. So I appealed that. That was 5 days ago. We'll see if I get a response. Surprisingly enough, we did get a response from Twitter, and they said, "Hello, we're writing to let you know we've reviewed your appeal, and your account will remain suspended due to violations of Twitter rules." So once again, intentionally vague. Twitter, unlike Facebook, allows you to place multiple appeals. I don't know why they have that, but they do. So I'm going to take advantage of it. And I've been sending them, every time I get a response back from them saying that our appeal has been denied, I just send them a new one for both Police to Police and the Free Thought Project. And so it's actually the past one that they sent us actually has just a bit more explanation, not much, but it says, your account was permanently suspended due to violations of Twitter rules prohibiting spam. Specifically, your account was found in violation of our rules prohibiting fake or artificial accounts, interactions, and engagements. And once again, we've never done that. But, if you've listened to our podcast before, I've explained this. Like, we didn't use Twitter for at least 3 years. And just until recently, when all these throttles started to happen with our Facebook bans, that's when we started to pick up the Twitter account a little bit more. But we'd never, we don't share other people's posts. Like, all I do is literally schedule the same stuff that I would on Facebook, on Instagram, and put it up there. So what they're saying is completely false. So just another example, just yesterday, Instagram removed another image of ours. So we're kind of getting attacked from all angles here, whether it be on Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram.
Was that the Thanksgiving Day one?
Yeah, that was, the Instagram post was basically like a picture of like a pilgrim and a Native American, and it said, Thanksgiving, celebrating the day Americans fed disease undocumented non-native language-speaking illegal aliens from Europe. And I don't really feel like that's incorrect. I don't really feel like that's any type of, quote, hate speech. It actually goes more in line with what I was reading earlier. I think I shared with you guys in our Free Thought Project chat, but a lot of this stuff is actually all done by algorithms. And, I guess we kind of knew that before, but they just recently on the 15th made like a newsroom update explaining a little bit more about their processes and how they're taking more action. They're kind of boasting about it, actually. They say, quote, we're getting better at proactively identifying violent content before anyone reports it, specifically for hate speech, violence, and graphic content.
Funny thing is, though, is this what anybody wants? Isn't the majority opinion for a generally uncensored internet?
Yeah, no one wants to be told, spoon-fed this information. It seems like Facebook is taking this measure on their own, based on like what the government keeps telling them.
And they're acting like they're providing a service and doing a favor to everybody else in their statements. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And we gotta to put that in perspective, we gotta look at what they are censoring and what they're not censoring. So most of the content that they censor is stuff like what we put out, which is peaceful political content that on government accountability, police accountability, these things that call out corruption and the hypocrisy of the state. And in the meantime, they're literally selling children on Facebook posts that stay up for weeks. Then this is not a conspiracy theory. We actually covered this week. Fucking insane. So a 16-year-old girl was put online by traffickers who wanted to sell her for marriage, and this was done on Facebook. So the post was allowed to stay up. The girl was sold. They openly bidded on Facebook for this girl. And these were not just this wasn't just any girl that people were bidding on. Like, there was high-level government officials. This wasn't the United States, but this was in South Sudan, but still it was allowed on Facebook, and not only allowed, but it continued until the girl was actually sold, and then remained up for a week or so after she was actually sold. So while Facebook is shutting down our police accountability page and Liberty memes and Free Thought Project pages, they're literally allowing child auctions for girls to be sold into slavery or indentured servitude for marriage. Yeah, they caught it 15 days later and claimed, oh, well, we removed it. That's against our terms of service. Well, no shit, it's against your terms of service. And had you not been so worried about deleting people who question the state and who want to bridge the divide between the left-right paradigm, maybe you would have caught that a little bit earlier, and perhaps the authorities in South Sudan could have gone and stopped this child from being sold. That's the problem here. It's like they're more worried about this political content than they are about actual content, like where a child is up for auction, which is disturbing.
And what's funny is, like, I read a interesting post by Mark Zuckerberg on the 15th that he made, and it was entitled "A Blueprint for Content Governance Enforcement." And I think I shared this with you guys as well. But he said. And this kind of blew me away because, I'm not really sure where he lies here, if he's actually like a sociopathic liar, hypocrite, or if somebody's kind of twisting his arm to implement all this tyrannical content enforcement. But the first line says, many of us got into technology because we believe it was a democratizing force for putting power in people's hands. I've always cared about this, and that's why the first words of our mission have always been, give people the power. I believe the world is better when more people have a voice to share their experiences and when traditional gatekeepers like governments and media companies don't control what ideas can be expressed.
That's insane. I mean, I agree with what he says, but I don't agree with that his actions correlate with that at all.
Well, then he followed it up by completely discounting in that statement. You know, he like how the Facebook wants to move to get rid of content that kind of pushes the boundaries.
Yeah, that's actually one thing I wanted to touch on, because they are actually admitting that it's something that's borderline that they approve, that they want on their site. People apparently always push this line, and those types of posts get more engagement. And what they say is our research suggests that no matter where we draw the lines for what is allowed, a piece of content gets close to that line, people will engage with it more than on average. Even when they tell us afterwards they don't like the content, this is a basic incentive problem that we can address by penalizing borderline content so it gets less distribution and engagement. So that's kind of crazy, because we're not even breaking the rules, but we're still noticing that our posts are getting throttled. And so this makes total sense, because now they finally admitted that this is what they're doing. And they've also said they do the same thing when it comes to groups and pages as well. And quote, this pattern may apply to groups people join and pages they follow as well. This is especially important to address because while social networks in general expose people to more diverse views, and while groups in general encourage inclusion and acceptance, diverse groups and pages can still fuel polarization. To manage this, we need to apply these distribution changes not only to feed ranking, but to our recommendation systems for things that you should join. So that makes total sense why a lot of these big alternative media pages died at like a certain amount. We've had tons of people reach out to us and say, our followers died at like a certain amount. I can't get past 100,000 followers. It makes total sense. And we've seen this ourselves on our group just recently in the past month. Our number of members have just plummeted. There was a time there when we were getting 50 to 100 a day. We're lucky if we get 15 to 20 now. We're posting more now than ever in quality content. So it makes sense.
Right. They want to keep everybody in a safe space because they understand that controversial content might lead to people getting past certain views, and they don't want that. The Facebook wants everybody to stay in their own little box, in their own little compartment that they want them in, and anybody who crosses those boxes, which this content actually helps to do, then that's a danger to the establishment, because people who bridge the divide and break that divide and see something outside of their little information bubble, they might start questioning things, and then that would be dangerous.
Also, we definitely want to remind everybody that the motivation here for this is because Facebook is partnered with a group that pretty much is associated with everybody that we criticize, from the police unions to the pharmaceutical companies to the military-industrial complex and on. The Atlantic Council pretty much comprises of all these different organizations and then some. And, it's not just that Mark Zuckerberg has a personal agenda against alternative media or anything like that. It's that they, for some reason or another, probably coerced or willingly, because they're trying to play along, because they don't want to get broken up into some kind of public utility or something like that. They are partnering with these groups that have a definite agenda. And these groups are using these platforms, as you guys said, to specifically target political information while ignoring things that are actually problem issues, whether it be slave auctions or child pornography or things like that.
There's certain things that algorithms won't be able to pick up. And when they do, they're problematic, right? So that's why I got a 30-day ban for an ET meme. And just recently, just yesterday, I think I saw a post from Jeff Berwick. He recently got a 30-day ban. The notification he got was, you may have used Facebook in a way our systems consider unusual. Even if you didn't mean to, you can't post again in 29 days. It's like, how does that improve the user experience? And we're just people who use Facebook and social media to try to plant seeds. This is part of what we do. This is part of our job. But if you're just a regular normie and you're using Facebook and these things are coming up, of course, we're getting more attention because of the information we post, but I'm almost positive these algorithms are also affecting just normal everyday users. And
it is, and I've heard feedback from multiple people, whether it is a young hip-hop artist trying to promote their mixtape or a DJ trying to promote an event that they're playing at. Those things, as simple as them, those people are getting screwed and flagged, and they're unable to build their businesses or put out their art, which actually really sucks, because a lot of the reason why I was successful early on with my rave company is because I utilized MySpace to bring a lot of people into these events. And that was an example of the internet bringing people together and creating this and essentially turning me into an entrepreneur. That is definitely not possible for young artists now, and it's much more difficult for young entrepreneurs now who almost need an investor for a marketing budget to pay for Facebook ads to just get their friends and stuff to see it. This is a very important issue that is affecting many people, and it will continue to. And on the issue of media, this is definitely going to radically change the conversation one way or another, whether it's going to completely push everybody back into the left-right paradigm because other voices aren't welcome, or if it's going to create some kind of hopefully new renaissance of distribution channels because there is a need for true information, or at least another perspective. I don't want to say that we're always the truth, but we're another perspective.
I think that we are actually not to that point yet, but I do find that point to be inevitable, where the market demand is that we need to be moved from Facebook. But we can see what's actually happening with these moves by Facebook. You know, like didn't you post an article about like Yemenis children being slaughtered or in the genocide, and then Facebook removed it recently, Vibes?
Yeah, actually, it was the Mint Press News article about how many millions of children and innocent civilians have been killed since 9/11 overseas by the U.S. military. Yeah, and that was taken down, considered
and it's spam. A fact. The U.S. kills children overseas, and the U.S. military kills children overseas. That's not it's undisputed. The U.S. government admits to it, and they're deleting that for people sharing that. The implications of such censorship are starting to materialize. We're seeing. You know, we're seeing no one question wars anymore. We're seeing build up against Iran, just like we did to go into Iraq. We're seeing all this, and it's crazy, and it's like no one's saying anything. You know, the Trump supporters who supported his non-interventionist policy have gone back to sleep and are now like, yeah, Saudi Arabia is not that bad. Maybe we should start a war in Iran. You know, these. And the sanctions are now starting to starve people in Iran, the U.S. sanctions in there, and no one's questioning shit. You know, they're all just still tied up sharing these stupid fake memes that keep going viral, and no one is any wiser. You know, they're all back asleep, and until I thought that this big Facebook purge that we had recently was going to shake people out of their out of their stupor, and because it got a lot of coverage internationally. But weeks later, what comes along is Jim Acosta, one douchebag from CNN, gets fucking banned from the White House, and it's an international story and an injustice. The Supreme Court comes along, and that's the story we're talking about. We're not talking about the 800 independent media outlets who are literally changing the world for the better, all being banned by Facebook and Twitter across multiple platforms. We don't talk about that. We're talking about Jim Acosta. Woo, he can't go in the White House. Oh my God, the injustice, the travesty, the horrid nature of not being able to cover the bullshit that they talk about at these White House press briefings. That's the inevitable result of what's happening with Facebook, and we're witnessing that. And until people realize that, then we're not gonna see that market for these alternative social media platforms and content sharing platforms explode until people understand this.
Yeah, and the more I go through this situation, the more I realize that I don't think that the people who follow us the closest, I think they really do understand what's going on. Probably the people who have have been following us for close enough to subscribe to this and be listening. Not them, but most people just don't have a good understanding of what is going on behind the scenes, both here and in the mainstream media. People think that they're the journalists out there doing things, and that, the people on the TV, and, they're just reading off teleprompters. They're sticking within a very narrow view of what is okay to talk about, and they're not deviating on any of the important issues. They still think that heroin should be illegal. They still think that we should have all these wars overseas. They still have no problem with the drone program. It's pretty much a general consensus among them on all the issues that the alternative media is very, very serious about. So meanwhile, the people that we know personally, the people who have gotten screwed over this past month and are now out of jobs and are unable to go around and research these stories to the extent that they did before, the live streamers and the journalists who have been keeping up on these stories, they are the ones who are doing the real work. And in many cases, we're the ones who are pushing the narrative too, because 9 times out of 10, the news is just reporting about the stuff they found out online or what initially went viral on social media. And, as I said before, we've definitely threatened that, but still, after all this time, even some people who follow our work, I don't think they see this divide, and I think they still look at the traditional media establishment as journalism. They still look at these press briefings as reality, when it's nothing but the government delivering you word for word the exact information that they want you to have. And it's all a pre-scripted list of reporters that are able to be in there. I've talked to individuals who have gotten press passes to be in there, and they have just gotten it out of luck or by a connection or anything. They weren't on the regular list, and they weren't able to be called on. They weren't able to have their questions asked. Pretty obvious that that's just an establishment show there. And I think that even more, I've never seen this in the past. Like in the past couple of years, you didn't see this whole journalism thing. And still, I guess it was maybe Trump attacking them that maybe made them go this whole defensive journalism thing. But I think a lot of it is to try to maintain their credibility in the face of alternative media as well.
Well, we don't always agree with Noam Chomsky, but one of his quotes I think resonates especially with this scenario is, "The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum." I think they're doing a wonderful job of that.
Yeah, 100%. That's a perfect way of describing it.
Yeah, it's why CNN's able to get away with things like saying that the biggest terror threat in the U.S. is white men, and that's like, if you would say that on if I would go and say that right now on Facebook, I would be banned, or if I said that on Twitter, I would be banned.
Yeah, they are doing like equal opportunity banning now. I think Matt Bergman got a ban for calling somebody a white devil like a couple weeks ago.
It's interesting to see people up in arms about the whole Acosta situation when we've seen more kind of pressure from the federal government, well, at least rhetoric coming from them about Julian Assange as well, about how he could be facing some possible charges, and they're trying to close in on prosecuting him or whatever. I mean, we've been hearing this for a while, but it seems to be escalating even more in the past week or so.
That's a great point. Like, people are more worried about Jim Acosta, who's contributed absolutely zero, like probably negative to humanity, when Julian Assange is about to be thrown in prison for waking up millions of people and trying to stop war and bridge the divide. And here he is about to go to jail, and that his story is all but like a blip on the media. In the meantime, we're talking about if the video was edited over Jim Acosta karate chopping the White House intern's arm, that's the news, instead of actual Julian Assange, who showed Americans video of actual U.S. troops gunning down reporters from a helicopter. He's going to jail, or he might be going to jail soon. He's been in jail, in the embassy, but. We find out that the U.S. has had essentially like international warrants out for him.
Well, it doesn't play into the partisan narrative because both sides hate Julian Assange now. Back, maybe, I don't know how many years ago, when the Chelsea Manning video first came out, Collateral Damage, I believe it was called, through WikiLeaks, WikiLeaks and Julian Assange was like a hero of the left at the time, because I think that was still Bush era, maybe, wasn't it? Or at the very tail end of it, beginning of Obama, end of Bush.
Yeah, I think it was 07.
Yeah, so, he was kind of like a hero of the left at the time, and the right was after him, calling him a traitor. The left was all defending him. But then, once he starts putting out stuff that kind of shows, I guess, gives a little bit of favor to Russia's side of the story on geopolitical events where the U.S. is attacking Russia's allies, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or when information about Hillary Clinton comes out through WikiLeaks and possibly sways some people's opinion about her, then the left hates him. And I think that the right never reconciled the issue with him being a quote-unquote traitor. And the left is so triggered about the election that he is an enemy to both of them at this point because of all this dumb partisan bullshit.
Well, WikiLeaks famously said last October, in 2017, that everyone loves WikiLeaks when we're publishing information about those they politically oppose. There's so much truth to that, that Julian Assange, I think one of his last tweets, before he was silenced, he actually went after Trump for his subservience to Saudi Arabia. And this is well before Khashoggi and all this, So earlier this year, Julian Assange tweeted out that the Trump administration's subservience to Saudi Arabia's military adventurism in Yemen has led to 8 times the drone assassination rate of Obama. Most killed are civilians. Obama, in turn, had 10 times the drone kills of Bush. That's why they're not talking about Julian Assange, because he doesn't fit into the left-right paradigm just like us. So he's an enemy of the established order on information, and so he's deemed a threat, silenced, and not talked about. It's like almost clairvoyant, right? Because now the world is seeing his subservience on full display after he sanctioned just a few people in the death of Khashoggi, despite CIA evidence showing that the Saudi High King actually ordered this assassination of a journalist, which is crazy. And had any other country, had Assad been accused of it with even zero evidence, rest assured we'd have sent in drone strikes or something like this. But Trump, on the other hand, he's like, well, we should probably wait to see if there's any more evidence. Well, why didn't you do that when there were these false flags going on in Syria, where you launched 100 Tomahawk missiles into a sovereign country as an act of war?
When he was saying wait for more evidence, what he really meant was, hey, let me give my boys some time to cover this up. Let me give my boys in Saudi Arabia over there some time to cover this up so we could get a good story and not have to put any foreign interests at risk.
Yeah, exactly. And man, there's I'm sure our listeners know who Congressman Tulsi Gabbard is. She's we disagree personally. Her and I disagree politically or economically on most everything, but when it comes to the anti-war stance that she has, she's a fucking hero in my opinion, man. She's awesome. She tweeted out this week, causing a whole shitstorm on Twitter, where she called Trump Saudi Arabia's bitch. And man, for her to engage the king of Twitter controversy, Donald Trump, and call him Saudi Arabia's bitch, out in the public like that took some balls, man. And she did it, and it was awesome. And I think that a lot of people, even Trump supporters, actually had to agree with her, because some Trump supporters are waking up. One of them is a former employee of the Free Thought Project, Cassandra Fairbanks. She actually tweeted in support of Tulsi Gabbard. She wanted Tulsi Gabbard and I think Rand Paul to run on an anti-war ticket, and she would join it, which is no surprise, but it was the fact that there are people like Tulsi Gabbard out there and Rand Paul questioning this is pretty amazing. But on the same note, this isn't in the media. This is the story. The biggest outlet to cover Tulsi Gabbard calling Trump Saudi Arabia's bitch was RT.
Yeah, and you'd think more of these politicians would be using this opportunity to call out Trump as well. This is the opposite of making America great again. So,
they're all Saudi Arabia's bitches. That's why they don't.
Yeah, so we have 2 politicians now who are actually honest about this, and 533 more that need to actually be on. I mean,
no, exactly. And people tried to jump on Tulsi Gabbard to say that she had no reason to speak because she went to Syria and met with Assad to try to prevent war, actually. But they didn't mention the fact that she went to Syria openly. She didn't do it in secret. And she spoke
not
with
like
Assad.
John McCain.
Yeah, going into the Ukraine, and meeting with literal Nazis. Not this Antifa shit. Literal Nazis who literally do the Hitler salute and want to kill everybody but their race. Yeah, John McCain did that. But no, Tulsi Gabbard she met with Assad and trying to bridge a gap that to prevent war. She came back with some of the most honest intelligence that any of U.S. intelligence system couldn't even get. And
Isn't she a veteran as well?
She is a veteran. Yeah. She actually was in Iran. She saw combat. It's yeah. So she has the credibility to do all this, and so people failed miserably trying to, tie her or try to say she's some kind of demon for visiting with Assad, and they just repeated the same establishment narrative that Assad is murdering his own people and everything. And granted, he's not like a great person. He's not a good person, but there's so much evidence showing to the contrary of like all these chemical attacks that they're not actually the Assad regime doing them.
When I read her tweet, the first thing that popped in my mind, and I guess I'm just started to be conditioned about all this, but I read her tweet and I thought to myself, man, that sounds like it's going to be deemed as hate speech. I wonder if Twitter is going to remove this post and block her. And then I started thinking, I was like, well, I don't know. Like I don't think that's how it works with like politicians or celebrities. Like they're kind of allowed to say whatever they want, right?
Yeah. Well, and you can say anything about Trump. I'm not standing up for the guy, but people call for his death all the time on Twitter. They call for genocide of white people and genocide of capitalists, and they get away with that all the time. So yeah, if Trump is fair game. I think you can pretty much say anything about him. I think you can even directly threaten him. And they don't give a shit.
He'll just block you.
Yeah.
Can we take a second to talk about hate speech, though? Because I feel like it's one of those like very ambiguous terms. And I actually took a second to look up the definition, which is speech that attacks a person or group on the basis or attribute such as race, religion, ethnic origin, national origin, sex, disability, sexual orientation, or gender identity. I thought the one that kind of struck me as the most interesting was national origin. I mean, when I think of nation, I don't think of necessarily it being your like ethnicity or your race. I feel like that's something that's kind of ingrained into us. We're indoctrinated into.
Or you're saying that maybe it could prevent people from speaking out against a political organization, perhaps?
That's kind of more or less what I'm thinking.
Dude, when they start saying that criticizing Saudi Arabia is hate speech, we better all start moving to an island, because that's what I think that the slippery slope of saying that you can't criticize certain countries or anything like that. A Twitter user was banned this week or last week. A feminist said that men aren't women, which is, that's a logical fact, right? Men aren't women. Trees aren't rocks. That's how it goes. My hand is not my foot. So that's like a statement. But she got banned for that from Twitter, and they classified that statement, that simple statement that men aren't women, as hateful speech, and they banned her. And it says because she said that Twitter's reasoning was that it was promoting violence against or threatening or harassing other people of an ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or religion, or disability, or serious disease. And I don't think that was being hateful at all. Even in the context that the tweet was in, it wasn't. It was just a response to three people, And this is a feminist who's just trying to, stand up for women's rights and saying that men aren't women, and she was banned for that. And that same thing happened in October. Another feminist group put up the dictionary definition of woman, which is noun, adult human female, and she was forced to remove all those billboards, and then she was lambasted in the British media, and as a hateful person and everything. And she's totally not against any LGBT or any transgender person or anything. She's a feminist who is outspoken for women's rights and believes that in the definition of a woman, and that's it. I don't
definitions matter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that kind of makes me want to open a can of worms that I've been getting into recently, and that is the sense that, like, as you guys are saying, these definitions, there is this new kind of sociological movement to change definitions for things in order to bring in information that I think has legitimate points, but I don't think we should change definitions because of it. So, for example, like in this case of the gender that we're talking about, I don't personally agree with traditional gender roles in the sense that I don't like sports. I don't really care about cars. I'm not athletic in any way. I don't care about being strong. I'm not the least bit competitive, and I have no interest in being alpha or whatever that means. So all that stuff, that society stuff, I think is completely ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think, including sexual orientation, people should be able to do whatever they want in that realm. When it comes to definitions, though, it's like we need some way to denote who's born with a penis and who's born with a vagina just for medical reasons and stuff like that.
I know.
Like, and so, and the other thing is, like, if we're not going to believe in binary traditional gender roles, then why do we have to have the definitions change? You know what I mean? We could just do away with the gender roles and still assign names to the genitalia. That's kind of how I feel. And in the more even more complicated subject of racism, there's the element where they try to say that, only white people can be racist because it's this privilege plus power thing, and when for the longest time racism means just hating a person for their race, being prejudiced against them for their race. Now, privilege and power obviously exist. They obviously are an important part of the equation when you're talking about the conditions that exist in society. You know what I mean? And I think it's obvious that, at large, most black people are going to have a different experience with racism than most white people. And that's valid to talk about. However, when you change the definitions of things, it makes it impossible to even talk about that stuff when you try to forcefully inject it into the conversation by putting it into the definition, if that makes any sense. So, like, I think that these SJWs would get way further with their actual, if they were being honest and stuff, with their actual legitimate goals of, addressing the issues of power relationships and stuff like that, if they were to actually say that, yeah, racism exists in all sides, but, like, let's talk about the power structure and how it affects people of color. You know what I'm saying? That's an entirely different conversation that I think instead of changing the definition, which puts up barriers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, that's what, instead of actually attacking the problem, many of these social justice warriors like that they're just trying to change the arena in which the battle is fought by removing anybody who questions what they say or their authority, and then that way they win every argument. So when they claim to be politically correct, but it's not really political correctness. It's more related to intolerance, and so they don't tolerate any opposing views within their circles. So, and they make these circles by changing definitions and then and creating these arenas where their arguments win, even though many of their arguments are entirely illogical and make no sense whatsoever. And it's scary that that's actually happening, with this information age, that some of these people can, rewrite reality to live in these bubbles that in which they win all the arguments. And that's what happens when you see these crazy videos of, like a low IQ Trump supporter just shuts down some crazy social justice warrior in like 2 seconds with just logic, just asks a question, and they're unable to answer it, and they result in, because their bubbles collide, and they're unable to, to process information that's contrary to this force-fed bullshit reality that they've been given for this entire, like maybe college career or whatever, and it takes away from the power of the real problem. There is racial disparity, dude. The drug war targets people of color far more than it targets any white man ever, and a white man and a black man go to the jail they both have 2 grams of cocaine. The white man is not going to jail. The black man has like a 90% chance higher rate of going to jail for the exact same crime. And
I'm pretty sure us white people do more drugs too. I mean, if I'm
definitely more cocaine, probably. But I mean, seriously, but you don't ever hear these people talking about that. You always hear them talking about these definitions, and they want it's because they're trying to create this arena, I believe, that they control, and then that way definitions don't matter anymore as long as they're the ones that write them.
Yeah, I think it would be an interesting study, and I haven't done it yet, but it would be interesting to see who. I know that the postmodernists get blamed for it a lot, but I don't think that they're entirely guilty for it. And there are some postmodernists who had a brilliant, great things to say that I agree with. So it's a very nuanced conversation on that level. But it would be interesting to see where these definitions actually changed and who was the thinker that did it and who they were funded by and such like that. Because I definitely think it is kind of it has not brought progress to these conversations. I think it has shut off both sides even more, and it makes it more difficult to communicate. And I see this happen in economic debates all the time, because in anarchist circles, the debates between capitalism and communism and all these variations of both always exist. And a lot of the reason why people can't talk to one another is because each side has an entirely different definition of what capitalism and socialism means. On the ANCAP side, to them, capitalism means free markets, socialism means government. To the anarcho-communists, communism means sharing and capitalism means exploitation. So they come to the conversation with these entirely different definitions on the subject, and it makes it impossible to ever come to a conclusion. And I think that the same problem is developing in race, gender, and all these other areas too, where there are legitimate conversations to be had about the stereotypes and such of culture, but I don't think this conversation is being had in the right way at all.
I mean, yeah, definitions and logic matter. We can't just start bending the rules. And I feel like these kind of catch-all euphemisms such as like fake news or conspiracy theories or hate speech are basically like intellectually lazy way of responding to like their emotions. And more or less, they've been kind of turning these terms into being censored. This is what they use to, as a mask, as a veneer, to actually employ censorship. But generally, the people who are screaming these, fake news or hate speech are generally just feeble-minded people who are too intellectually lazy to know how to articulate an argument as a response.
There's these 2 guys, Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay, right? They prove this point that we're talking about. They like infiltrated academia, and not as a hoax or anything, which is what they were largely referred to by the media, but to expose the problem with this. And so they I don't know if anybody's familiar, but what they did was they published a bunch of papers in academia in legitimate, recognized, peer-reviewed journals. And I mean, they were the most absurd topics. Like, one of them, they actually just rewrote Mein Kampf, Hitler's Mein Kampf, and then changed, took out the word Jew and put in like white man, and they actually it got reviewed and got almost to the point of publishing, and
they won awards on some
of these. Yeah, they won awards on one of, I think it was the one where they like. It was something about
it was either the
dogs
fat body. It was either the fat bodybuilding or the dog park sexism one.
Yeah, and I think it was the dog parks, which was it was fucking insanity. I heard it
Dogs
on
shitting on each other's heads and stuff.
Yes. Yeah, it's like the patriarchal society transposes to dogs, or I don't know. It was some ridiculous study, but they not only did it get published, it had absolutely zero evidence behind it. They made up all the numbers, and it got published, it got peer reviewed, then published, and they got selected and won an award for this paper that they completely made up. And that's what they set out to do this, to not to make fun of these, this people, but to prove this problem that's going on in this arena. And this is this is academia. This is what we're teaching people right now, and it's like a spreading problem.
Yeah, I think that the college system and of course the public school system has a lot to do with this. And you see it, and I'm not going to name names or anything, but I know people that are in the college system, and you can see that it's like, okay, the college must have been talking to you guys about voting this week, because that seems to be, and my wife goes to college too, and she says that she sees the stuff real bad. They'll be putting their heads full of all this crazy stuff, and she's even more, progressive than I am in certain ways, and she thinks it's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could definitely tell that people are adopting their worldview from these colleges, and it seems like they put more trust into the colleges than they do into their high school, like into what they learn. And I think a lot of people get some kind of superiority from going to college too, and they think that they know shit that other people don't because they're being brainwashed by a professor.
Yeah, and that's what you get. That's what you gain when you create these arenas and you redefine words and everything. That you have the upper hand, the superiority. So it's in the name of like social justice. These people are literally turning into tyrants. They shut up everybody else who they don't agree with. They disallow any free speech, and they're the only ones that can talk and have the arena. And that's the opposite of what they're trying to get. And I think that's where Jordan Peterson is so spot on with that. He exposes a lot of that and shows how it's this neo-Marxism movement that is pretty dangerous. And these guys like that, their studies that they published, those fake studies, hopefully that sets to make a bunch of these kids question what the hell they're really doing there.
Well, it's the 80-20 rule, right? So if 80% of society gets on board with certain societal norms or beliefs, worldviews, then the other 20% gradually over the course of time, their kids' kids start to adopt these ideas. I mean, we could look at the police state as an example. I mean, what are kids going to think? I mean, tanks on the streets, that was new for us. We didn't have NRAPs when I was growing up. That was unheard of. The more that society, the more that academia pushes these concepts, and mind you, without a logical perspective, a lot of this stuff is emotionally based. And like I said, there's euphemisms, a lot of intellectually lazy people who don't necessarily understand the concepts that they're trying to espouse, but because their friends all believe it, because it feels like the right thing to do, or there's some kind of warm, fuzzy feelings attached to the emotional side of things, they feel like they're doing the right thing, but it's not always the case. I think that's what kind of gets me so riled up about all this hate speech nonsense. I mean, a few of my posts now have been pulled down because of, quote, hate speech. To me, I don't know, it's just definitely lazy. And like Ron Paul says, we're dire need of intellectual revolution.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I will say that I actually will address some criticism that we got on the last one in this regard from somebody who follows me that hit me up respectfully and took issue that we talked about the issue of the blackface versus people calling for extermination of races and just talking about the spectrum of what happens in as far as the problems caused by racism and quote unquote hate speech and how it isn't that much of a problem. And I think that people are just used to hearing a certain thing, you know what I mean? And if you deviate from that, then you are in the racist category or in the bigot category. And I think we saw this happen with the Kanye West thing, because everybody started saying that he was, shilling for Trump and he was a Trump supporter and stuff. He did put on the hat, but he never really supported Trump's policies. He just was nice to the guy and went there and told him that he was wrong about cops and that he was wrong about a whole bunch of things. Not many people can be able to get their way into the White House and tell Trump that he was wrong about a bunch of shit and actually have him still saying kind things about him. So but yet he is still being called all these names. He donated all this money to the security guard who was killed by the cops. He's donated money to the California wildfire victims and stuff like that. And I just think that when you deviate from the regular parroted things that everybody says, especially on the issues of race or gender, especially if you're a white dude with a penis that's, planning to stay that way, you find yourself in the crosshairs, because we're not allowed to have opinions about this stuff. I have to say that when people come back to us with feedback, I take it to heart and I listen to it. You know what I'm saying? Because maybe my perspective is clouded by my own life, and I'm perfectly willing to admit that. But I still have the right to think and respond to that criticism and talk about it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. And that's the problem with people these days, because they're all redefining their own definitions and bubbles and keeping themselves, and with Facebook's help and everything, they're unable to take an idea and it's not, and without holding it self-evident and actually critically think about it, or even for that matter, criticism, fuck, give me one idea that blows my mind. If you try to criticize me, I'm going to start crying, and it's hate speech. That's a big problem, and you hit the nail on the head, man. When people come and they want to offer criticism, and they do it in a constructive and fine and nice manner, then that's how progress is made. That it's when people jump into these vitriolic conversations, and not even conversations, just yelling matches and shouting matches, or they just, some people email us because they don't like an article that we put out, and they'll be like, you fucking tyrant, fucking pieces of shit, I hope you die and all this. And what is that doing? That's not doing anything. And I think that the reason that people are unable to do that more and more so these days is because they're being kept in these bubbles. That social media giants like Facebook and Twitter are helping to create.
And the point you made right there was yelling people down obviously has not gotten anywhere. And then Kanye West tries a different approach and is able to bring up prison reform in the White House, and his wife is able to get a former pot dealer sprung from jail. So I'm just saying, sometimes you get more, what's the saying?
Flies
you get more
with honey.
Exactly. Yeah,
Bees with honey.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, you get more flies with something else. Well, yeah, that's a good place to wrap it up today. I'll remind everybody to please hit the subscribe button, rate, review, share, all that stuff. Really, really helps us stay alive and keep this going. This Free Thought Project 2.0 that we're running here. So thank you again for staying with us, and stay free. Peace.
Hey Sheriff County, this is Sheriff County COPWATCH. I am using any video here under fair use. If you have criticism, reporting, teaching, etc., and please donate. I do not make money from YouTube, and there are different ways to donate in the video links. Thanks.